Ooble dooble, toil and trouble. To my cauldron I'll add a cuphead of sorrow, with salty tears sure to follow. Ah, let's see what's next. A few drops of butthurt sweat, with pretension to rival an onion. Now as we let that brew, take a seat and we'll review many a gamer and journalist's salty stew. God, that was so lame. Cuphead, this incredible, unique gem of a game. It really is as special as everyone is making it out to be, and I wouldn't wait for a price drop with this one. There probably won't be one for a long ass time, and it's only $20, and I would have paid so much more for it. You should definitely try it. This game has made me so happy. I love every little thing about it. Every little detail is perfect. This game is just... it's perfect for me. Oh my god, the nostalgia, like from the rubbery cartoon style from Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry and other stuff, and the Candyland boss. So happy. And the jazz, it's so nice, and I love jazz. The creativity of each level and boss, and even the stages of each boss, all of it, this whole fucking game is incredible. And to top it off, they made it hard as fuck for me to get A+ on everything. I'll be able to spend so much time trying to get these perfect scores, and it'll feel amazing when I finally get there. I'm so happy. At first, I played through a level and a few boss fights, and I was thinking, this is more challenging than average, but it's not too hard. It's just right. That's what I said last night. It took me a few tries to get all of them to A+, and I loved every single horrible minute of it. And it really wasn't that hard. I was thinking, oh my god, these filthy casuals thinking this game is ass-clenchingly hard. I must be above average for once. But then I get these bitches. I need to get A+ on each fight before moving on to satisfy myself. And these little shits ruin it for me. This game is top caliber to me, and for an indie game, this is incredible. I can't say it enough how much I love this game. And they have earned a lot of respect from me for not pandering to people whining that they don't want to put the work into beating something. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this game, lots of fighting, so let's talk about it. Here is the story on how this little indie cup broke the industry.
I don't wanna grow up, 'cause baby, if I did.
When is exclusion a valid design choice? Let's put that aside for a moment and ask another serious question that's at the heart of this rather nasty conversation that has sprouted up again due to the game's difficulty. Are you owed the act of finishing a game because you bought it? A game asks you to get good enough at whatever challenges it offers before you can see the whole thing. You will be tested, and only those who have earned the higher levels through completing those tests will ever see them. Which is why so many hardcore gamers are aghast at the idea of games like Cuphead offering an easy mode or an option to skip the boss fights. The art is beautiful enough that seeing the next level is its own reward for mastering the game's punishing bosses. Or at least that's the idea. If you're not good enough to finish that level, you are not deserving to see the next one. There should be no shortcuts. And that's the problem here, isn't it? The difficulty will turn some people off, and those people will never get to see that art. They will never enjoy those animations. They need a skip button. Okay, let's stop pretending that someone needs to be able to beat the game to see the art and animations. Everyone knows you can see it online through the thousands of people streaming and making videos about it. No one is robbed of seeing the art. What a dumb argument. Cuphead has upset a lot of people, including some critics. It brought up some debates, one of them being, should games implement a skip boss battle button for people that suck at games? Because we need to include everyone, including the people that are not willing to work to get better at the game and progress. No game needs to include everyone. They aren't like movies or shows that everyone can be a part of. The beauty of video games is that as a whole, they are already inclusive. Expecting each individual game to be inclusive is ridiculous. Just don't play the game if it's too hard for you, or it doesn't include characters that you identify with if that's important to you. That's the beauty of choice. And there are so many great games for all types of gamers that you can go play. And this is just one indie game. It's not as if it's a huge
huge game. Cuphead wants to be difficult. They want to be known as a difficult game. I don't understand what's so wrong with that. I love Cuphead's difficulty. I prefer games like these to be hard, or else it's just something pretty to look at. I want to spend hours and hours trying to get that A+ on each stage and boss fight, and everyone can beat this game. It's just about patience and persistence. I'm glad that the developers didn't cater to everyone. I don't want to be able to quickly beat the game with no challenge. The sense of achievement is so strong in Cuphead, and that's something that nowadays many games are lacking so that they can include a wider audience. It can partially ruin the experience for some hardcore gamers. I think most gamers are a mixture of hardcore and casual depending on the game, but in my opinion, to make a high quality game where you're working to achieve something, it has to be difficult in some way. You have to earn it. You have to work for it in some way. You can't just breeze through it. It's not like an interactive movie, which there are games like that. There are games that are basically interactive movies, and that's great. You can go play those. Whether that be grinding the shit out of it, which means you have to dedicate your time to achieving it, or having lots of obstacles in the way of your goal, making it harder to get to where you want to be, or having RNG systems like with loot, mob spawns, or crafting where there's sometimes less than a 1% chance of getting something. And for online games, if you dumb down your game and make certain aspects easier and easier, it just kind of ruins the game for a lot of longtime players, and I've wound up quitting stuff like WoW over it. If you don't agree with me and you want to be able to skip boss fights and breeze through levels in every game, spending hardly any time, just so you can see the storyline and experience the aesthetic, there are games made for you. And if you can't manage to get through certain games, you do have the option of watching someone else play it. And that's what I love about the games industry. I can jump on games that I have to put time and effort into, like Fallout or Oblivion or World of Warcraft or Arcade or Blade and Soul, Terraria, RuneScape, and games that are difficult where I have to actually try, like For Honor, Cuphead, Dark Souls, or League, or Fire Emblem on the hardest settings. And then whenever I want, I can go play a game that requires hardly any time, skill, or effort and enjoy it for just the storyline, aesthetic, or just chill, mild gameplay, like all the Telltale games, Animal Crossing, or like all the old Sims games that I love so much. They had storylines, and I'm so salty that EA just decided not to make any more. And games like Until Dawn, well, I guess that one might be considered hard because of the QTEs, but you get what I mean. And one indie game that decided they want to make a difficult game to please people like myself shouldn't be criticized for doing so. Go praise the developers that make games that you want. Cuphead wants to be hard. Let it be hard. What the heck? And I'm obviously not saying games that are made specifically for children should be difficult. I still play old-ass games made for mainly kids that are mindless for nostalgia.
But Sylvie, we just want the option to skip the fight or pick an easier mode. It doesn't change your experience. We just want the option.
Cuphead already has one easier mode, and it does remove some of the content, like I guess the last stage of the boss fights, and I think that you have to complete it all in regular mode to be able to continue throughout the entire game, or so I've heard. But like I said, everyone can beat the game. Sure, it's hard at first, but you can beat it. Just stick to it. And it does make sense on the surface, but to me, and I'm guessing many other gamers, I don't want to have a skip boss battle button just sitting there, knowing that all the time I'm putting into defeating the boss and moving on to the next one can just simply be skipped, like it's just hovering right there. In Cuphead, it forces you to work at it, and you will eventually win. Just keep trying. I don't even like that games like Fallout 4 offer a difficulty setting that you can change whenever, so you could be clearing an area that you're struggling to clear, and because you know that you have the option to dumb down the game for a bit, you might give in because it can be tempting. I prefer the normal difficulty to be hard, like in Cuphead, and no option at all to change it. And a lot of people are saying,
well, what about people with disabilities? They don't get to play Cuphead. They're not included.
Polygon is arguing that they're excluding people with disabilities. It would be nice. It would be so nice if disabled people could experience everything, but they won't be able to play every game, and they know that, I'm sure. If they can't play through Cuphead, they can watch others play through. They can still partially enjoy the experience. And some people enjoy watching others play games more than actually playing them. And there are other games that they can play. Also, I wonder how many disabled people are actually upset and expecting a indie game that labels itself as challenging to include include options for them. This isn't a kid's game or a casual game, it's a game that specifically wants to be beautiful, creative, and very challenging for everyone at the same time. So players can feel accomplished, and when they say they beat Cuphead, people know exactly what that means. They know the pain and the struggle. But a middle ground that can still be enjoyed by hardcore players and casuals much better is if they only allowed an option for difficulty in the very beginning, where you can't change it at all, unless you're making it harder. But specifically with Cuphead, I am so glad that they did not cater to these people. They had something so special and stuck to their choice in game design. I hope to see more games like this in the future.
Heard you were talking shit about my game, nerd. Don't make me shove your ass into a locker.
Game journalism.
So I'm sure you've already heard about this, but back in August, a game journalist played Cuphead and could hardly get past the tutorial. He has been a game journalist for over 18 years, and a journalist for much longer. But to be fair, the majority of his articles aren't game reviews, and I feel like a lot of people are missing that. It's not like he's just pumping out game reviews all the time. But anyway, he said that platformers are not his thing. In his response on Reddit, he said he has played platformers. He has a decent history of playing a variety of games, as should any journalist, especially at his age. I mean, you played Contra, but you can't get through the easiest tutorial. He's much older than me, so of course he's had more time and an experience with gaming, and I don't have much history with platformers. He's been a gamer for 45 years, ever since the original Pong came out. The most recent games that are considered platformers that I played would be Terraria and Trine. And when I picked those up, it was easy. I didn't need time to figure out controls. It was intuitive. There weren't any problems. And it had been so long since I've played a platformer. I can't even remember the last one I played. I'm sure there were more, but I just can't remember it. But I've never had problems with the controls because I play games. And when I first started gaming at 3 years old, my first game was the first Spyro game that had just come out, and I easily understood the controls and quickly learned how to play. His gameplay— oh shit, I used the word gameplay. According to senior editor at Rock Paper Shotgun, anyone who ever uses the word gameplay needs to seriously consider their life choices. Fucking gameplay. Are you kidding me? His gameplay, especially the tutorial that's one of the most basic tutorials I have ever seen, suggests that he doesn't understand the mechanics of the game. A very basic game. To me, it seems like he might have played games in the past and loved them, but currently maybe he doesn't sit down to play through games anymore. So how could he possibly be professionally discussing games and telling you what's good and bad when he can hardly even play through a simple tutorial? That's partially why nowadays I turn to YouTubers for their reviews. I like that I can see how they actually played the game, and typically they show their actual gameplay, and I get a feel for their individual preferences for each genre, since everyone has very different views on what makes a good game, and user reviews are more reliable, in my opinion, since they aren't being paid to say anything, instead of going to a well-known site like IGN or Polygon. 2 8 out of 10s? What? Maybe it's good, I'll give it a try.
After 30 hours with its competitive multiplayer, I'm thrilled that developer DICE has made exactly the Star Wars multiplayer shooter I've always wanted.
No, it's not. Let's take a look at some of his responses to the situation. He has said many times that he failed miserably at Cuphead, laughing at himself, thinking people could just laugh with him, and of course people weren't laughing. They were upset because he's a game journalist, and he has written reviews in the past, and he says himself he writes a dozen or so game reviews per year. He isn't just some YouTuber or streamer that everyone can laugh at for failing. It's part of his job to be decent at games. Not amazingly good, just able to at least get through basic tutorials. And someone actually wrote an article on how Cuphead's tutorial sucks and isn't intuitive. This tutorial isn't intuitive. What? Following the outrage, he wrote several articles about the situation and even went to Reddit to defend himself. Another game journalist, and some say shitlord, saw my video. He clipped it to the 2.5 minutes of the most damning inept gameplay, and he posted it to his followers. He used me to condemn all game journalists, raising the smoldering issues around Gamergate and its focus on game journalism ethics. I'm 100% sure that he's talking about Ian Chong here. Ian Miles Chong is a game journalist himself, and he doesn't think every single journalist is inept. He does reasonably criticize them and questions their ethics based based on various evidence. He goes on to say this.
His post was political propaganda for the disenfranchised gamers, the sort who went from Gamergate to alt-right and elected Donald Trump as president.
Okay, so this went from a discussion surrounding game journalism, questioning whether game journalists should be decent at games, to everyone that criticizes me is alt-right, Gamergate, and elected Trump. As if attaching these labels that are generally viewed in a negative light, especially for people that aren't informed, to people that are criticizing you somehow negates their arguments and you win some sympathy card from the general public. Because you know people will see
Alt-right, voted for Trump, Gamergate,
and immediately side with you. When in doubt, scream that your opponent is alt-right, maybe sprinkle in Nazi, racist, white supremacist, homophobic, transphobic, everything fucking phobic while you're at it, and you'll win. Because we're now children on the playground that use assumed labels to fight our battles. And if he has paid attention at all since Gamergate, he'd know that Ian Chung wasn't in support of Gamergate in the beginning, and he is an alt-right. But now your readers will think of him that way, because nowadays it's okay to stick incorrect labels on people, even some of the worst ones. And that's another thing that bothers me, is that people like Dean Takahashi take a group and box them in together. For instance, Gamergate or anti-feminists would be a good example. People from various sides of the political spectrum can fully agree on certain things without agreeing on anything else. Gamergate is loaded with people from all over the political spectrum. Same with anti-feminists. We aren't all the same. For fuck's sake, we aren't all right. What the fuck? That should be obvious. Game critics need to be decent at gaming to be able to review games. No one is asking them to be esports level great. They just don't want their inability to play games properly to affect their reviews, which it has for Dean Takahashi, the journalist that could hardly get through the Cuphead tutorial. Back in 2007, he wrote a negative article reviewing Mass Effect, which he referred to as Mass Defect. And there were several points in the article where he seemed to just be bad and blames the game. He didn't seem to understand the mechanics. Being bad at games can affect your ability to properly review. But like I said earlier, he specifically doesn't write many reviews, so it's not as bad in his case. But he said himself he writes a dozen or so game reviews per year, so that is more than enough for players to be concerned. And he isn't the only game journalist that's bad at games. I'm sure you all remember Polygon playing Doom. But one thing I do think would be nice is if people tried a little bit harder to not get too heated and overreact when things like this happen. You can criticize and even make fun of them or their mistakes without going too far. They're still human, and he certainly isn't bad at his job. Hell, he works 15 hours a day. He just might not be reliable for reviewing games. What's the difference between a game critic and an avid longtime gamer, you ask? Nothing at all. Just one is paid to say things. Apparently, to Jack over here, good writing is more important than being good at gaming. All you really need is good writing, research, and interpersonal communication skills, as well as the ability to apply those skills efficiently. Writers hone their craft for years before committing to a professional career, not only developing their writing abilities, but researching gaming trends and how other journalists cover the industry. You're not setting a foot in games journalism if you write like a fish. Oh. Okay, you don't need to be great at gaming, but you do need to be decent and have an actual understanding of the gameplay. And this perspective where he argues that you only need good writing, research, and interpersonal communication skills is why we see articles written by people that clearly had never played the game they're writing about, or had only spent a tiny bit of time playing it. Not all journalists, just some of them. A great example is Pokemon coverage. You'd think for such a popular game, you'd have at least one writer on staff that plays it. I personally don't play much Pokemon. I played a lot as a kid ever since they first came out, and I was very into the card game, but right now I'm more of a casual with Pokemon. However, my fiance is fucking hardcore into Pokemon. Over the many years, he's poured thousands of hours into it, and he's still obsessed and still reads most of the coverage on it. And he constantly finds articles where their reporting is incorrect. One time he found an incorrect statement on several articles, the same one on each article, and he traced it back to this one article that was written by someone that clearly had no understanding of the game. So all of these game journalists couldn't properly report on Pokemon of all games. So yes, I think it's way more important to be an actual gamer that's decent at games and has a solid understanding of the gameplay rather than a writer that can do basic research. Writing about games isn't passive like writing about movies. You have to actually play through the game. And the guy that wrote that first incorrect Pokemon article even had a fucking Pokemon set for his avatar, as if he's an actual fan. It's like all those fake fans that act like they're obsessed with Pokemon, but know hardly anything about it, and when asked what their favorite Pokemon is, surprise, surprise, it's fucking Pikachu. When you only wear Pikachu merch and don't know anything about the games, or even the anime, or even the cards, your ass is shady. But yeah, of course, if you can't write for shit, you probably shouldn't be any type of journalist. And of course, not all game critics are bad. I'm not saying they should be fired. I just question their integrity sometimes, and especially more so since Gamergate. There are a few that I actually like myself. They're not all the same, obviously. Anyway, guys,
Smell you later.